Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim Martin, and I am the CREP Program Manager. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today as we kick off the FY2023 CREP Annual Reporting process. CREP provides us with a way outside of traditional CRP to address conservation concerns and specific geographic areas by leveraging federal and partner resources to achieve goals outlined in each CREP agreement. This annual reporting process provides us with an opportunity to report our conservation achievements to Congress. FSA continues to work on improving all facets of CREP, some of which include looking at ways to improve the CREP annual reporting process, identifying additional resources and tools that will accurately and comprehensively capture program benefits, and dedicating staff to assist current and new CREP partners at a regional level. We have a great team that will be helping with the FY 2023 annual report. In addition to myself, our regional specialists who provide outreach and assistance to existing and new CREP partners and FSA state offices throughout the U.S. include Patrick Lewis in the West region, Nathalie Nemitz in the Central region, and Johanna Davis in the East region. Ben Garber, Management and Analyst with the Economic and Policy Analysis Division, also plays an important role with the CREP Annual Report, and he will have some additional information to present later in this webinar. So each CREP agreement includes language requiring the CREP partner submit an annual performance report to FSA. I believe nearly all of our active CREP agreements provide a December 31st due date. However, if your CREP agreement does provide a different date, we will honor that. The annual performance report must include information that's specified in your CREP agreement, information requested in that online report and required by Notice CRP 1009. That notice was attached to this webinar invite. We'd use this information to complete an FY CREP annual report for Congress as required by the Farm Bill. Several years ago, we began collecting CREP annual report data through an automated online report. The CREP Online Annual Report Instruction document was emailed out to FSA State Office Specialists on Tuesday. It provides detailed guidance for completing this online report. Today, we'll be providing a brief overview of the reporting process, but the team is available to answer any questions that you may have once you get in there and you start completing that report. So the report does consist of 5 parts. Parts 1, 2, 4, and 5 must be completed and submitted for a report to be considered complete. Part 3 must be completed if a CREP agreement includes more than 5 goals. The emailed guide provides links for each part of the online report. You will notice that as you finish each part in the online platform, a link for the next part is provided. If you have difficulties accessing any part of the online report, please do not hesitate to contact myself, your regional specialist, or Ben Garber. Following are a couple important reminders. Once a part of a report is started, it must be completed. Unfortunately, our reporting form does not have a mechanism to save the data entered and allow you to return to it later for completion. Speakers. We recommend entering all of the needed information. To get around that or to kind of help with that situation, we recommend entering all of the needed information into a word processing document, such as MS Word. Once all needed information has been gathered, you can complete the online report by cutting and pasting text from that word processing document into the report. Several pages on the report do have required items. These are identified with a red asterisk. These items do need to be completed before you can move on to the next page. If any questions ask you for entry of a dollar amount, we ask that you only include the numerals. There is no need to enter the dollar symbol. And then finally, you will need to enter or need to provide the same response for CREP agreement name and reporting year in each part. This year, we did provide each partner with the CREP agreement name in the subject line of the CREP enrollment and payment data email that was sent earlier this week. We asked that you use this name when you're submitting the report to help us compile all the responses for the final congressional report. So in part 1 of the online report, you will be entering the CREP purpose. Again, this year, this was something we included in that CREP enrollment and payment data email that was sent earlier this week. So if you scroll down in that email, you will see that we've added the CREP purpose in addition to your CREP goals. You will also need to identify non-federal financial commitments and in-kind support and other non-federal commitments or support. This can be broken out based on the different types of in-kind support provided during the reporting year. The instructions provides the more detailed information, but by selecting yes to question 11, you'll be provided additional set of questions about the in-kind contributions, while selecting no will take you on to the next section. After submitting part 1 of the report, a link to start part 2 will be provided. And if you're not ready to start part 2 at that time, you can use the links that are provided in the guide that was emailed to start part 2 at any time. I'm going to switch this over to Ben so he can talk to you all about some goals.
Thank you, Kim. So goals start in part 2 and extend to part 3 as well. We'll get to that in a second. The part 2 is the goals and objectives of the agreement. And these you should be able to find these in your agreement. Please put in the goal and as it's written in that agreement. And essentially what we're asking for here is the goal itself, again, as written in the agreement, the goal type. And your choices here are water quantity, water quality, habitat, or other, and then other has a fill in the blank item. What progress you've made towards meeting the goal. And we'll talk about what exactly we're looking for there here in a second. And then any difficulties you've experienced in meeting the goal, if you have experienced any difficulties. And the way the form is set up, you'll do this for your first goal. And then in part 2, you can do it up to 5 times. It'll ask you if you would like to add another goal. So please go in and add all of the goals that you have for part 2. I think pretty much everybody is going to have at least 3, but please put in however many you have laid out in your agreement, up to 5 for part 2. And then in part 3, part 3 is the exact same thing, but it's specifically for folks who have agreements with more than 5 goals. So if you have, I think we're set up for 6 to 10. I don't think anybody has more than 10. You'll put anything after the 5th goal in here. And the setup is exactly the same. We're asking for the goal type, the progress towards meeting the goal, and the difficulties exactly as in part 2. If you have 5 or fewer goals, you can skip part 3 entirely and move on to part 4. Again, the link for part 3 will be at the end of part 2, and the link for part 4 will be at the end of part 3. You should also be able to access them from the instructions everybody received as well. So next, I'm going to go through some examples that we've cobbled together that show what we think are some examples of what we'd really love to see in terms of how folks are reporting their goals. This isn't really to play favorites or to highlight, places where some folks are making more progress than others. This is really just, these are goals where the format was really good, and specifically, reporting progress was really precise. And that's the kind of thing that we'd like to see as much as possible when folks are reporting their goals. So for this one, the goal is to reduce irrigation water use in the agreement area by 49,800 acre feet to 69,200 acre feet per year. So it's on an annual basis. Of course, this is a water quantity type goal, and I'm going to try and show examples of each type of goal before we wrap up. And then in terms of progress, the folks who put this in said that measuring devices have been required on all wells within the district, so within the agreement area, since 2009. And then that's the actual performance is measured annually, and that's used to measure total progress. And then they let us know that irrigation water use was reduced by 48,036 acre feet, or 96% of the minimum 49,800 acre feet per year of the goal. And then for difficulties, they said that while they're close to meeting the goal, changing and lower irrigated rental rates and higher commodity rates have reduced interest in the program somewhat. So a couple things I'd like to point out here. One is that in this case, the goal is written to have very specific numeric targets, and the units that are to be used are clearly laid out. Obviously, since we're using the goals as they're written in the agreement, not everybody is in a situation where the original agreement was written with such precision. But as much as possible, this is the kind of stuff we'd like to encourage, is these very numerically measurable goals. Likewise, would like to highlight that there's a little bit of discussion of how this number was arrived at, right? In this case, it's on-site measurement. And then the goal itself, progress towards the goal itself, was reported in the same units as above, with a precise numerical answer of here's the progress we've made this year, and then also like what percent of the total minimum threshold that they're trying to meet. So it's got both the absolute term as well as the percent listed. So the second goal example that we have, this is an example of a water quality goal. And the goal itself is to add the capacity to remove 300 to 600 tons of nitrate nitrogen per year from agricultural tile drainage. Over the next 10 years, this would add wetland capacity to annually remove 3,000 to 6,000 tons of nitrate nitrogen from agricultural tile drainage. Over a 60-year life, each wetland acre would remove approximately 20 to 40 tons of nitrate nitrogen. The progress towards this goal, 3 wetlands were constructed in 2022, which remove an estimated 34.4 tons of nitrogen from the receiving waters. And then it says that these wetlands will remove 5,164 tons of nitrogen over their estimated 150-year lifespan. And then it lets us know that cumulatively, all the CREP wetlands constructed to date remove 790 tons per year of nitrogen, at a weighted average cost of $496 per pound of nitrogen removed from the receiving waters. And then the difficulty that's reported is that some action items in this process can only be worked on sequentially, slowing implementation. That's kind of a condensation of what folks provided, but that's the gist of things. So what I'd like to point out here, there's a lot of information presented, but essentially this really gets at, again, the very measurable goal of what we're actually trying to achieve, what threshold we're trying to hit with this agreement, that at least 300 tons of nitrate nitrogen per year removal from agricultural tile drainage. And then there's a lot of detail on how that kind of scales out and how they arrived at the final number. We have both an estimate of progress this year, which is great. So an added 34.4 tons of nitrogen added this year. Or removed rather, I suppose. And then kind of a more cumulative goal. And then specifically in terms of that annual goal that this agreement is trying to meet, here is what all of the wetlands constructed to date are doing. 790, which is in this case, well above that minimum threshold of 300 tons of nitrate nitrogen being removed per year from tile drainage. If I was going to offer some constructive criticism, this one is great. We do always love to see the percent. In this case, it's clear that that goal is actually being exceeded. It would be, I guess, probably about 250+% of the original goal. So we do like to encourage folks to add the percent of the minimum threshold if they can, just because it makes stuff a little more standard and a little bit easier for Congress to compare apples to apples. But yeah, another great example of reusing the same units and keeping everything kind of in consistent terms and letting us know what progress has been made this year, as well as where we are in terms of the total goal listed in the agreement. So this one here, this is a habitat goal, and the goal here is to provide riparian buffers on 1,000 stream miles to permit natural restoration of streams which meet habitat requirements of key aquatic species in the agreement area. So the progress towards meeting the goal is that CREP currently provides riparian forest buffer along 600 miles of streamside on streams that support key species. Annual increases in mileage have been approximately 20 to 30 miles per year. And then as of September 30th, the end of the fiscal year, this goal is 60% complete. So this is cumulative totals rather than annual, but the concept is pretty much the same, right? How many of those 1,000 miles have actually been constructed and restored? Again, love that folks are reporting, yearly progress towards the goal as well. For difficulties, they gave none. So as far as difficulties go, if you're not experiencing any difficulties, we prefer that you don't leave it blank. We want to know essentially that folks are responding. But if you don't have any difficulties, please feel free to put none. If you are having difficulties, it's not going to reflect poorly on the agreement or anything like that. We just want to know what difficulties folks are experiencing in terms of implementation. By the same token, if you really feel like you're not experiencing any difficulties in implementing a certain goal, there's no need to, kind of invent one. Just say none, and that's great. We're glad to hear things are going well. The other thing I'll point out here is that in the case of this goal, it's not 90% complete. It's 60. We're not saying these are quote unquote good goals or good progress on goals because they have significant progress made, especially for, some of our agreements are a little bit newer. This isn't about how much of that percent threshold a specific agreement is hitting, although obviously we would love for all of our agreements to eventually hit 100%. It's really about, using those consistent metrics, those consistent units between what's in the agreement versus what's reflected in the progress, and making sure that it really is measurable, comparable progress that's being reported. And this goal does a great job of that. So our last goal, and this one is for the other category. In this case, it focuses on reduced energy use. So the goal itself is to reduce the total annual use of electricity by 2.76 million kilowatt hours through reductions in groundwater pumping. And then the progress given towards meeting the goal. Each center pivot is operated by electricity and monitored by several power companies within the region. The electricity is quantified by acre, and the total number of kilowatt hours is calculated by multiplying the number of acres retired through CREP by the electricity that it takes to irrigate the enrolled acres. And then in fiscal year 2022, about 2.5 million kilowatt hours were reduced, contributing to 91% of the goal being achieved. So yeah, kind of similar stuff to what we've seen with our other goal categories. We have a distinct benchmark that we're trying to meet, in this case on an annual basis. We have a bit of an explanation of where this data came from, how it's being calculated. So it's pretty clear to the reader what's going on here in terms of the math. And then there's a specific number of where we're at with the goal, as well as what percent of the threshold that's being met. And in this case, no difficulties were experienced, so they put none, which is great. So those were some examples of the stuff we'd really like to see from folks. This is an example of an incomplete goal from several years ago. And we just kind of want to go through and say, like, okay, what's missing? So that it's clear kind of what we're asking folks to put in as much as possible. So the goal that's reported here is to reduce the nitrogen, sediment, and phosphorus loads in waterways. It's a water quality goal. And then the progress is that 15,000 new acres were enrolled in CREP practices that improve water this year. and then difficulties were left blank. They weren't reported. So a couple of the things that could use improvement here. One is there's not really much information on the quantification methods used to assess the goal. A major problem is that with the goal itself, it doesn't list a threshold that we're trying to meet. It doesn't list a unit that's being used to measure. Those are both big problems. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, since the goals are coming from what the agreement was originally written as, if the agreement, particularly if it's been in force for a while, it's not something that we can necessarily change on the fly since we're reporting the goals verbatim, but I did kind of want to illustrate how that makes it then difficult to measure it year on and year on. So again, kind of those metrics that are being used to track progress towards meeting the goal are missing. In this case, since we're talking about nitrogen, sediment, and phosphorus loads, we'd expect it in like pounds or tons or something like that would be considered conventional. And in this case, acres are being reported, partially because there's no guidance in the goal itself as to what to do. And I think most of us who work in the conservation space, obviously there's a correlation between acres of enrollment and reduction in nutrient and sediment loading, but it's not the same, it's not apples to apples comparison. And there's also not any information given about how somebody could convert the new acres of enrollment into reduction in loads, on a pounds per acre basis being applied across those 15,000. So we really don't have enough information here to understand where we are with meeting the goal itself, which is actually reducing those sediment and nutrient loads. Also, we don't know where this goal is in terms of completion. There's no percent of the minimum threshold. And again, some of that is because there's no threshold given the goal itself. But we don't know how much of the total enrollment this 15,000 acres might be or anything like that. And then the last thing with the difficulties, there's no information provided on the difficulties. Again, just to kind of reiterate, if these difficulties exist, please report them. We would really like to know what's going on with different agreements. If none exist, that's fine. But we do ask that folks just put none in that case rather than leaving it blank. That kind of lets us know that everything's okay. So this is a quick plug for folks who either need help with quantifying some of the outcomes of their goals, especially if you have the goal that wasn't originally written in a particularly precise way and you're looking to add some metrics that might be useful. Or if you already have some great metrics, but you're looking to expand what you can add here. Some experts that we've worked with in the past have recommended INVEST, which some of you may be familiar with. It stands for Integrated Valuation of Ecosystem Services and Trade-offs. It's a free suite of software models that Stanford University put out that can be used to map and value the goods and services from nature that sustain and fulfill human life. Broadly speaking, it's used to quantify ecosystem services, which is obviously really useful in the context of CREPs. These models are spatially explicit, so they use maps as inputs to gather the information and then also produce maps as outputs. And then they can return results in biophysical terms, which a lot of times is what our agreements look at. So things like tons of carbon sequestered, tons of nutrients or sediment removed, things like that, or in economic terms. So for instance, the net present value of sequestered carbon or nutrient removal or things like that. So INVEST may be useful to folks in helping to quantify existing CREP goals, particularly ones that don't have specific metrics, or if you're looking to report new metrics of interest, such as climate benefits, and those might be things that you would want to report to stakeholders in your state as well. But generally speaking, we also want to be clear that if you have questions with INVEST, or especially if you maybe need some help with metrics, would like to report something a little more precise than what you're able to right now, even if you're not comfortable with INVEST, please reach out to myself or one of our other team members. and let us know, and we're happy to help, particularly if you're having a problem before completing the report. We'd be happy to sit down with you and explore other options to make those metrics a little bit stronger, particularly before that information gets put in and we start working on the report. We want to make sure that all of the work that you're doing in all of your states on all of your agreements is stuff that's being measured and given appropriate credit for all the work that's being done. So please feel free to reach out to us with any and all questions. With that, Kim, I think it's back to you.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to part 4. Part 4 of the report is looking for information about non-federal field reviews that have been completed. And, this is just if applicable. Just want to point out that these field reviews do not include the required reviews that FSA or NRCS complete during the reporting year. If you do have some non-federal field reviews to report, you'll answer yes, and at that time you'll be prompted with some additional questions to enter some more information about those reviews that were completed. Also in part 4, we're looking for outreach activities. You've got the ability to report up to 6 outreach activities here. Works similar, if you answer yes, that you have more, it'll continue prompting you with additional space to enter to report that information. If you have more than 6 outreach activities, you can report that in part 5 through the additional information freeform box. Part 5 provides an opportunity for partners to submit other information and photos. Here we're looking for at least one success story. This is a required field. In the past, and we've focused on a reporting year specific success story. So for example, did several landowners collaborate on a larger enrollment? Did an outreach or field event result in increased interest in enrollment? Really anything that you see as a success of your CREP program in the last reporting year. Now, if you don't have or can't, a specific FY23 success story doesn't come to mind, we would like to challenge you to look at the overall performance of your CREP project. We understand that there is often a bigger story to be told when we are looking at conservation accomplishments. So what is the conservation success story of your CREP project? Has CREP enrollment resulted in conservation improvements in addition to and beyond the goals that were identified in your CREP agreement? Also, we are collecting or looking for any challenges. So this is a little different than the difficulties that Ben had talked about with the goals. The challenges are those that are encountered while implementing your CREP agreement during that reporting year. Future actions, this is looking at proposed future actions that may be taken under your CREP directed towards meeting the purpose and goals of the agreement. So these are all future-facing actions. And then, of course, there's an opportunity to provide us with suggestions for improvement. So these are suggestions related to improving the implementation of the CREP. In the additional information section, this is where you can provide any additional information related to your CREP that may not have been adequately reported through the prior report entries. So if there's something you are wanting to report to us but didn't feel that you were able to capture that in other areas of the report, you can enter that information here. And then finally, we love photos. So, your photos add to the quality of the report, and they may be submitted for inclusion in the annual report. We ask all photos be emailed to Ben Garber. His email is listed here on the slide, but then it is also available in this section of the report. When you're emailing the photos to Ben, it is important that you include your CREP name, the date the annual report was submitted, and then any additional information or description of the photos that are being submitted is helpful. Do want to point out that not all photos are going to be able to be used in the report, but we do save them for future reference and use. So again, we appreciate anything and everything that you were able to share with us. So several times during this meeting, I've mentioned the FY23 CREP enrollment and payment data. This was an email that was sent earlier this week to FSA State Office Specialists. I just wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about the data that was included in that email. The acres enrolled and re-enrolled during FY 2023, those numbers are based on the CRP contract start date. So they will include acreage that is associated with our CRP sign up 57 and 59 contracts that have effective dates beginning October 1 of 2022 through September 1 of 2023. The federal payments, these were those payments issued during FY 2023. These payments are broken out, or they include annual rental payments, incentive payments, so our SIP or PIP payments, cost share payments, and then if there are other incentive payments applicable to your CREP, that's been identified in the email and provided to you. And then, as I mentioned, I think earlier with this email, we also went ahead this year and included the CREP purpose and then the CREP goals that are provided in each CREP agreement, just to assist with your reporting process. I am going to pause here to take any questions that you might have. Ben and my contact information is provided here, and in just a few moments, I will forward to the next slide, which provides contact information for the 3 regional specialists in case you weren't able to jot that down at the beginning of the presentation.
There's a couple of questions in the chat. Can we get a copy of this presentation? We are recording this, so we will be able to get that out to you guys. Will you be using photos this year? We did that last year and they were sent in. Do you want them sent in NID by section?
Ben, is there a specific way that you prefer photos be sent in?
I mean, if folks have references to specific sections, like that's awesome. That sounds great. We will do our best to keep an eye on all of the photos that we receive. This is my first full year with the project. We did have a personnel transition last year. So if there were photos sent that I did not receive, I apologize, but we will, I'll do my best to keep everything kind of profiled this year and keep them all stored well, and then we'll include as many as we can. It's already a pretty long report, so we won't necessarily be able to include every single photo, but we will. We definitely appreciate the submissions for folks that have them, and we will do our best to include as many as we can, and appreciate everything that y'all send us.
Couple more in here. Is there a space limitation in Part 5, question 7?
And I just looked, that is the additional information section. And Ben, I will be honest, I do not know if we have a character limit on that specific item, but I will tell you if you run into trouble with a limit on the amount of text you're able to include, feel free. Ben's email address is throughout the report at different points. Feel free to put that information into an email and send it to him, and maybe reference that this is information that you had wanted to include in Part 5, question 7, but were unable to. And we will be sure to put that together. Does that sound okay with you, Ben?
That's absolutely correct. I don't know of a character limit for that one. But like Kim said, if you run into one, please just send me like the Part 5, question 7 with the subject line referencing the specific agreement that it relates to. If you run into a space limitation, that's probably the best way to deal with it, especially since anything that's long enough to hit a character limit on that is probably going to be pretty tough to read in the Excel spreadsheet that we get from the Google form. So if you send that via email, that's actually fantastic. So if you run into a space limitation on that, please just email me and let me know.
We also have a question about what documents are being looked for. So I know Kim mentioned maybe using a Word document to cut and paste on. Is that a specific tool? And where is the CREP name being sent to within the individual reports?
So the word processing document, that is whatever word processing document that you might have access to that you feel comfortable kind of outlining your report responses that you can cut and paste it into the report. So we don't necessarily have a word processing document that we're sending out to you to fill in and then cut and paste. As far as the CREP name, it's in the subject of the email that was sent out earlier this week. The CREP enrollment and payment data, it was the first part of that subject line. So for instance, in states that we only have one CREP agreement, it's often just the state name and then CREP. So for instance, Illinois has a single CREP. So the CREP name, as far as reporting purposes, you can simply enter Illinois CREP. States that have multiple CREP projects, there is a little bit more information in that name, so we can distinguish the reports and make sure that they're attributed to the correct CREP projects. So look at the subject line of that FY 2023 CREP enrollment and payment data. The first part of that subject line is your CREP name. And if you've got any questions or want clarifications, please let us know and we can certainly help with that. And I see there's some questions, the questions that we are to answer. So you can view the questions ahead of time to answer in that CREP annual report instruction guide that we emailed out. I think it was yesterday. That report has screenshots of all the questions that will appear in the different parts of that online report. So that's where we're suggesting that in part 1, question 3, where it's asking for a summary of your CREP agreement, you can use that word processing document to kind of frame out that information to where when you're ready to actually complete the report, you can cut and paste it into the online report. But the actual instruction guide does provide screenshots of all the questions that will be prompted as you're entering your report. Yes, and that the question is, was it sent to FSA? Yes. So just because I know that there are probably, as there are in FSA partners, you have staffing changes. So rather than, I mean, we do have contact information, but just to be sure we're getting the emails are getting to the correct people, we often correspond with our FSA state offices and we ask them to forward that information onto their partner. If you have not received this information, I would suggest you reach out to your FSA state conservation specialist. If you are not getting anything from them, please feel free to reach out directly to myself, Ben, or the regional specialist, and we would be happy to share that information with you. And question, can you send a copy of the final product to each state for the records? Thank you for asking that. I meant to say something and I forgot. So each year, in years past, we've told partners, if you want a copy of what you've submitted, send me an email and we will get that to you as soon as we get everything compiled. This year, no need to ask or request this. We are planning on just sending all partners. We'll use the contact name that was provided in the report. We'll send you a copy of what was submitted to us as soon as we have the opportunity to pull it all together and send it out to each partner. So we do plan on doing it. We'll do it earlier than we did this last year, but we'll get everybody a copy of their submissions. And I believe we sent out the FY22 submissions back in August. So if for some reason you did not see that come through, or you're needing a copy of what was submitted in FY22, please reach out to any of us and we'll get that to you. All right, are there any additional questions? And of course, if you think of something after today, please feel free to reach out to any of us. We're happy to answer any questions, or your state office conservation specialists are also a great resource. We appreciate your time today. As soon as we get this recording posted, we will send out the link to the FSA state office folks and ask them to share it with you. And we look forward to seeing all your reports.